I hadn't heard from her that day, and I thought, that's a bit unusual. Then I started getting some phone calls asking why she was MIA. I realised pretty quickly there was something amiss.
She was the face of the network, and suddenly she's gone.
We were all swapping notes saying, do you know what's happened?
I started hearing rumours that perhaps taken into custody. None of us had any idea what the context was.
This is a place where the truth is often buried.
She was a mark, she was Australian, they wanted to bully Australia.
Those regimes that think that they can pick up innocent people and throw them in prison for no reason whatsoever.
One day she was there, the next day she vanished without explanation. We knew we were dealing with something a little out of the ordinary. Justice delayed is justice denied.
Looking back, I had a few run-ins. It's very hard to summarize the censorship system in China. It's complicated because it's not cut and dried. Nobody will say, you cannot report on this. If you do, you will go to jail. Nobody says that ever. The longer I worked and lived in China, the more I thought I knew the place. The people I was talking to gave me this false sense of security that I was safe. I think I had an inflated sense of how the Chinese system worked. My name is Cheng Lei. I was born in 1975, grew up in Hunan province, a central southern province, infamous for being the birthplace of Mao. My childhood was relatively impoverished. Most of China was poor. I had no idea what the outside world was like, but in September of 1985, my life changed when I heard, as a 10-year-old, that I would be going to Australia. I felt like it was the most wonderful and exciting thing. And I just remember it was so bright. The air smelled different. Everything was strange and intimidating. And it was my life-changing journey.
How would you describe yourself?
Especially after incarceration, I figured out that was I supposed to start crying this early? I'm a kind person, and I love to help people. It makes me happy to see others happy, and upsets me when people feel hurt or sad around me. I'm creative and expressive and emotional, and I love to learn.
Lei has probably one of the sharpest intellects that I've ever met, but she's also a real, what I would say, a real dag. She's got daggy taste in music and in films. She's very down to earth, very loving, kind, great mum, really good daughter. Once you become her friend, you feel that she's very loyal. She's a really, really good friend.
I'm the mother to two wonderful children, Ava and Alex. And like me, they've been through a lot.
The origin country of coronavirus, China, has announced it will close its borders to foreign nationals this weekend. It's not clear how long the closure, which applies to foreigners holding valid visas, will remain in place. The Chinese government says the measures will be adjusted and calibrated in light of the evolving situation.
When COVID first hit, Ava and I and Alex were in Beijing. The kids couldn't go back to school, so they went to Australia for what was supposed to be a short time. But when China closed its borders and their flights were cancelled, they couldn't come back. It was so difficult for me because the kids had been constantly with me since the day they were born. I've taken them to work, take them everywhere. And now we were separated. It was such a desperate situation. Called in every favour I could to find out how the kids could fly back and when China would reopen its borders. I didn't have work that day. I was woken up by messages telling me to go to work. When I got to the meeting room, discovered instead of a one-on-one, there were 20 people sitting around a huge table. A man held up a badge and said that I was being investigated for supplying state secrets to foreign entities. My bag and phone were immediately seized. I didn't know why they looked so hostile. Then when the man started speaking, I was listening to the words, but it wasn't sinking in. I didn't say anything. I did as I was told. They raided my apartment while I sat in the living room. I was still protected by that calm and the confidence of the truly innocent. I felt they could go crazy, take everything. And in fact, the more the better. They'll just be disappointed. We left my apartment. I was blindfolded and we drove to the Ministry of State Security detention facility. I remember the sunset. It was the last time I would feel the sun for more than a year.
My name is Jeff Raby. I was the Australian ambassador to China from 2007 to 11. When you look at the Chinese judicial system, it's obviously very different than ours. It works on the basis of arrest on suspicion. You are held on the presumption of guilt, and then the evidence against you is collected and the case is put together. It is a system that most people in this country would find very, very disagreeable, very wrong.
RSDL is the Chinese spelling for hell. It stands for residential surveillance at a designated location, which makes you think it's house arrest. But in reality, it's mental torture.
The RSDL cell is about 4 meters by 4 meters. The windows are always covered by curtains. The bathroom has no door. The light stays on 24 hours a day. RSDL is where you're held way before you go to trial and way before you're sentenced.
Lei, we've recreated your RSDL set inside. Are you happy to come in and have a look?
Sure. I'd like to see it and for people to see it because nobody believes what he was like. And there's no footage of it anywhere. This is where I spent 6 months. Just sitting like this, thinking I was never gonna get out, and absolutely helpless. It's as close to dying and wanting to die as I ever got. So you're in a bare room and you are guarded and watched at all times by 2 guards. One stands in front of me, one sits next to me, and they take turns with the standing and sitting. I have to sit on the edge of the bed and have my hands on the lap, not allowed to cross the ankles or cross the legs, not allowed to close the eyes, no talking. No laughing, no sunshine, no sky, no exercise, no requests, no color. Just fear, desperation, isolation, and utter boredom. That's it.
How long would you sit like that for?
Probably 13 hours a day. I hated having to sit still and not being able to do anything. How do they come up with this? Just nothingness. Nothingness. But also a sea of pain.
I had no idea what was happening or how long I would be here.
Nick Coyle, live in Port Moresby these days. I first met Lei back in 2013. It was at a wine dinner in Beijing. We'd probably run into each other beforehand, but that's when we first met each other properly. At the time, I was the CEO of Auscham China, the Australian Chamber of Commerce over there. An interesting role, dynamic time, and that's how Lei and I first met, really, was through my work and her work, which sort of overlapped at times. Lei is highly intelligent, vivacious, driven, difficult, humorous, complicated, and wonderful in so many ways. Above all, Lei and I have been through a lot. I think there's a sort of, a connection there. It's love, it's care, it's trust, there's a lot of things that go into it, and we've never had it easy in lots of ways.
Nick and I have had an on and off romantic relationship over the years, but we've always remained close, looked out for each other, and stayed in touch when it matters.
I thought it was unusual. I hadn't heard from Lei. It was my birthday. I was turning 41. And then I started getting some phone calls, first from a good friend of Lei's, and then from another good friend asking why she was MIA.
I knew that the fact that I was unavailable on the phone, that I didn't make any plans to celebrate with him, would alert him to the fact that something was very wrong.
A few more phone calls trying to get a hold of her. I realised pretty quickly there was something amiss. So I decided not to go around that night by myself, just in case. You never know what you're going to find, right? The next morning I met up with a mutual friend. Went to the apartment, went in, and everything kind of looked normal, to be honest. Rummaging around, couldn't find a passport, and then I realised electronic devices were gone, so a computer tower was gone, laptop was gone. And I think it was then that I was pretty damn sure that she'd been detained. The question was then by whom. So from there I phoned a friend, as it were, from the embassy. He certainly didn't think I was overreacting.
I was ambassador in Beijing. Lei was well known to the embassy community. We got a formal notification, quite brief, from the public security authorities saying that they had detained Lei. Whenever there's a consular case emerging, there's a procedure to notify Canberra immediately and to set things in train. Now, occasionally you get a case which looks a bit strange or seems a bit more high profile, and this was one of those. We knew we were dealing with something a little out of the ordinary.
That's when I was told that it was the Ministry of State Security, and I think at that point in time I realised we were in for a long slog.
The MSS is a very, very powerful institution. It's essentially a political police force, if you like, to weed out spies, protect state secrets. It is about keeping the state strong and safe.
Of all the options, MSS was at the top of the list of the ones you don't want. Certainly my heart sunk, but you've also got to get practical. And I quickly switched from, oh shit, to what do we do? Knowing that probably it wasn't going to get fixed quickly. My next job was to ring her mum and ring her dad and tell them the situation.
When I heard the news, I was very angry and I lost my temper.
Dad lives in Perth. He's a retired academic and scientist. And when it comes to China's communist government, he has an armory of axes to grind.
China has a history against its people. They want to control people, the people become the slaves working for them. If you don't listen to them, they just get rid of you. So that's why I really worry about Lei's life at that time.
This is my mum, Hua. She used to work as a physics teacher. Her spoken English is not the best, but she understands just fine. For the 3 years I was locked away, she was there for Ava and Alex.
I said, why? Why is this one to me, to my family?
Did you think that I really did anything like what they charged me with?
I don't think so, because my daughter is a very good one. She always good to people, good for the job. But why? Why do this for her? For our family good too. We didn't do any bad things. I just cry all the time. So I ask her why.
This is one of the few times in my life I have seen her cry like this.
I did the requisite commerce degree, which Dad deemed more employable. Did well. I got an opportunity to intern at China Central Television. They really liked the fact that I had business skills as well as being fluently bilingual. I was super excited. The first week I was shadowing a reporter. I was taking notes, feeling like, this is not work, this is fun. Soon they made me a reporter. 3 months later, I was given a 15-minute show called Financial Review to present.
Today's Auto Show profile, I speak to Alan Mullally, the CEO of Ford, the second largest US automaker, about why they're having such a busy launch year.
As my profile grew, I found that I was being asked to more events where I would meet more influential people. Many of them would have seen the show.
China has recently issued an updated dietary guideline 9 years after the last one.
And my circle grew not just in number, but in stature.
Is there a one-size-fits-all model, or should there be a menu of best practices to choose from?
China changes extremely rapidly. I think people get addicted to the fast pace. I would go to dinner parties where there would be big hitters in business, in technology, bureaucrats, and diplomats, of course. It was such a thrill to do what I love. Whether it's talking to people, asking questions, trying to find out the backstory, all of it was so fulfilling. I thought a healthy amount of socializing to sniff the political wind, to have my finger on the pulse, was very helpful to giving context and nuance to my reporting. At the time, I thought that my beat was business and that state security or spies or secrets were all very far from me. They watch you shit, shower, and sleep. You're not allowed to talk. And to make the slightest movement, you must ask for permission. For example, I request permission to scratch. And only when permission is given, then I do scratch.
Formal accusation against Lei was conspiring with a foreign government. And that is so broad and loose, it could mean just about anything.
I asked how long I would be there for. I was told I could appoint a lawyer, but I wouldn't be able to see my lawyer. I was told that they would inform the Australian embassy. Later, I asked to write a note to the ambassador. And I remember writing, "Please visit me. I could really use a friendly face."
We put a huge effort into lobbying the Foreign Ministry, saying you need to give us access. It's our entitlement under the agreements that you've signed.
Started getting contacted by a few journalists, hearing rumours that Lei had been detained, but at the time we were trying to keep that away from the media and away from anybody, just on the off chance this could get resolved quickly.
I've had years of talking about my friend Lei, and people would say, I know you're friends with Lei. The reality is we kind of became friends while she was incarcerated. I'm Annalise Nielsen. I'm the Sky News Australia Washington correspondent. I live here in Washington, DC. There were messages going around from people I knew that knew her. We were all swapping notes saying, do you know what's happened?
We knew something was afoot. We didn't know what. My name is James Early. I've known Lei for about 10 years. I met her coming on her show. I was a frequent guest. I started to really worry when I saw on the CGTN website and saw every trace of Lei gone. That's not a clerical error. That's someone going in there and deliberately removing somebody who was really their star, right? She was the face of the network, and suddenly she's gone.
I was worried that Lei, because she mixed a lot with the foreign community in Beijing, and particularly amongst the diplomatic community and Australian diplomats, may well have been in a situation where she may have been compromised in some way.
Hayes, yeah, complicated. Hayes Farn, I guess at the time, probably her best friend.
I had a lot of sources. She had a lot of sources. So we would combine our resources.
The official name of Crow.
The White Walkers. No.
And bounce information off each other. Someone with whom I exchanged 60,000 texts, much to the annoyance of the officers.
Hayes was aggressive and a lot younger than Lei. I think she sort of saw it as her role to be a bit of a disruptor in the system and to try and chase stories.
Hayes was forever trying to get copies of government reports from me that hadn't been published in order to break the story at Bloomberg. And I wanted to help her because she had helped me. When I told her the 8 words, which were no growth target, GDP, 9 million jobs target at 7:23 a.m., I thought that would help her break the story, which they did.
Tons of questions about how then China will guide economic growth this year.
It's the first time in a long time that China will not be setting itself an annual growth target.
The charge was supplying state secrets to foreign entities, which boils down to texting 8 words 7 minutes before the embargo time to my friend at Bloomberg.
China has arrested an Australian journalist working in Beijing. Cheng Lei, a business anchor for Chinese state TV, was detained by Chinese authorities. Her 2 young children are with family members in Melbourne. Cheng Lei has not been charged with any offence.
With COVID, at the beginning of 2020, the US and China were caught up in a very virulent argument.
We have the pandemic, should have never been allowed to happen by China.
We found ourselves very much caught up in this tit-for-tat argument between Washington and Beijing.
Then there was Australia's response to COVID. Then there was our foreign minister calling for an independent investigation into COVID.
I think it's fundamental that we determine an independent review mechanism to examine the development of this epidemic, its development into a pandemic, the crisis that is occurring internationally.
Which sent relations to DEFCON, whatever the highest level of negative you can think of is on the Chinese side.
Australia is not interested in a trade war. We don't conduct our trade policy on a tit-for-tat basis.
Whether it's a spat or tit-for-tat, it's been supercharged by Australia's call for an inquiry into the coronavirus outbreak.
That really then led to a very dramatic and rapid deterioration in the bilateral relationship. Cheng Lei was arrested in August 2020. It certainly would look like this was an act of retaliation by the Chinese government against what they saw as behaviour by the Australian government, which they regarded as provocative.
I think it's impossible to deny the parallels between the Australia-China bilateral relationship and the arrest and detention of Cheng Lei. I'm Kylie Moore-Gilbert. I was wrongfully detained in Iran for 804 days between 2018 and 2020. When a foreigner or a dual national is thrown in prison for political or security-related reasons, sometimes that arresting state does seek to use them as leverage over their country of nationality. Maybe that's to get some sort of diplomatic concession, might even be for financial reasons. It could be sending a signal in terms of the broader diplomatic relationship between the two states.
But it has to be seen, I agree, in the context of the deterioration in the bilateral relationship between the two countries.
She was a mark. She was Australian. They wanted to bully Australia.
The lights are always on in the darkest hours of your life. And while you're exhausted, when it comes to bedtime, you cannot sleep because all of the demons, all of the fears and worries and feelings of isolation, they all come out and haunt you. And you just have no idea how you can shut all that off. You don't know if you'll ever see your family again. Because you don't know what they want. You don't know how everything you've done that you thought was good was now possibly criminal. Everything that once made you happy or gave you pleasure now just was so far and so removed from you. It was a cause of pain.
Solitary confinement is a form of torture. Prolonged periods in solitary are classified as torture by the United Nations, and with good reason, because the twisted logic of solitary is you do not need somebody to come and torture you. You become your own torturer inside your own head.
We had the right to see her once a month. The situation she was in, very, very tough, high pressure, very strict conditions. We were saying to the Chinese, she's not doing well. She needs contact. She needs more material just to help her connect. Of course, from their perspective, what they were doing was exactly what they wanted, which was to put her under pressure, to isolate her and sort of fit her within their scheme of things.
You're just so hungry for any connection to real life, to the outside world, because I felt we were in the netherworld.
30 minutes once a month was very significant for her and very significant for us. We would convey any messages that we had from people in Australia, and then she would give us messages to convey back.
Letters were my medication. They can be writing about the most mundane things. The mere mention of all that is Aussie, Anzac Day parades, AFL Grand Final. I'm thinking about, the smell of pies and scarves floating out of cars for whatever football teams.
It's hard to write to someone who's incarcerated and talk about my life of freedom and doing the things that we used to do together and having fun together. I felt very pleased that the letters had given her some comfort and sense of connection to the world outside.
As it happens, I have one of the letters that you sent to Lei in detention. Would you mind reading this out, please?
Well, she's put it in the book. I had no idea. I have to take my glasses off to read, okay? Hi, Lei, how are you? I've been in Brisbane today. It's Anzac Day, and the hotel where I've been staying is in the centre of the city. It seems that Anzac Day parades keep getting bigger year after year. Recently, I have had the opportunity to raise your case at senior official levels and with the ambassador in Australia. It is now on the agenda for all official meetings. Over time, like water dripping on a stone, this will make a difference. We'll write again. Meanwhile, be good to yourself, take care, and know that we will all miss you and want you back among us ASAP. Gosh, that's a shock.
I felt really sad for her because I knew how much she would be missing her kids. Every single letter I wrote, I made sure that I signed off, looking forward to seeing you, or can't wait to have you here and drinking red wine again, or looking forward to having a barbecue when you get back. And I'd also always say, when you get back. When you get back, we're going to do this. When you get back home, we're going to go and do this together and that together. I think the best thing you can do is make people feel like there is an end in sight.
You can feel so bad about your situation that you actually wonder if you'll have friends when you get out. If your name is forever tarred and everything that you've done up to that point has been wiped out and you are nothing.
those letters made me think I still had some things left, that I wasn't a bad person. It was more the sense that I am loved and remembered. Not everyone is there to get me, to hurt me and punish me.
The days, weeks, and months passed by, and still there were no formal charges.
There were in total about 30 interrogations, with about 20 in the first 2 or 3 months. There were video cameras, like there are now, taping everything. The interrogations were centered around what was on my phone. I was asked to write what they call a self-reflection. They have so many vague terms, but what it all boils down to is whether you admit guilt and accept punishment. Something I stupidly didn't know at the time. So I wrote what I thought had happened.
After each interrogation, they handed me a transcript to sign, date, and fingerprint. Even when it didn't reflect what I'd actually said, I signed it anyway.
You're just made to feel guilty.
We were pressing the Chinese, you've detained this person, she's away from her family, when's this going to come to fruition?
Returning to our top story, and an Australian journalist has been formally arrested in China after being held by authorities for nearly 6 months.
February 5th, the day I'd been hanging out for because it meant an end to RSDL, and I looked forward to having Cellmates. I was read the charges and officially arrested before being blindfolded, handcuffed, wheelchaired. Then the humiliating process of stripping inside a cage. I remember the chrome bars reflected because I hadn't seen a mirror in 6 months.
They pulled me from the hell of RSDL and dumped me in another cell, this time with 3 other women. I still had no idea how long I'd be there or when I'd ever get out.
Going from essentially solitary confinement to living with cellmates was a huge change for me, mostly for the better, because I could finally talk to others in the same boat. We could share some fun and laughter, and I wanted to know all about others' experiences to get a feel for how the detention centre was run. Of course, there are easygoing cellmates and others not so. So conflict within the cell is very common.
Again, I had zero privacy. Again, the cell was small, but this time monitored 24 hours a day by multiple CCTV cameras. One camera looked straight into the doorless, glass-walled bathroom. When officers didn't like what you were doing, they would issue orders over the intercom system. And the guards would also stand watch from the platforms above. For the next 2 years and 8 months, this is how I would live.
There was a sign that had the 20 commandments, so there were 10 do's and 10 don'ts. And the top don't is do not vilify or make derogatory comments about the party, the Communist Party, and its leaders.
So her trial didn't occur until March 2022, which was getting on to 2 years since her detention. You know, justice delayed is justice denied, so to speak.
In a full hazmat suit, including goggles and in handcuffs, I was taken down the lift to the garage, where a court paddy wagon was waiting.
Under our consular agreement, we are entitled to attend the trial of an Australian citizen before the courts, just as the Chinese can attend similar trials in Australia. But unfortunately, Chinese domestic law says if it's a national security case, no one can get in. And we knew that was going to be the situation. They would turn us away, but we kind of wanted to make a point. So I went to the courthouse on the day and tried to get in.
As you've seen, we've just been denied entry into the trial.
We didn't make it known that the trial was happening then, but the word got out, and so there was a camera or two out there.
This is deeply concerning, unsatisfactory and regrettable. We can have no confidence in the validity of a process which is conducted in secret.
So I said very plainly, this was unsatisfactory. How could we accept that a trial was being conducted properly if we had no idea what was happening inside the courthouse?
Nevertheless, we will continue to advocate strongly for Ms. Cheng Lei's rights and interests in accordance with the consular agreement between our two countries.
At the end of the trial, after all the evidence against me had been presented to the court, I was finally allowed to make a statement. I want to say I'm so sorry for causing trouble to so many people. I am guilty and I accept punishment. All I ask, Your Honour, is that I be sentenced and sent to jail quickly so my family can visit me.
We knew that they had to sentence her because they have to show that they were right. And so a guilty verdict doesn't mean what it means in countries with fair court systems. It was notable that press was even able to be there outside, that we could see some of it fed back. And then it was just a waiting game to see what the sentence would be.
Detain, arrest me, accuse me of these things means no going back. There is no way they would admit, oh, oops, we thought she was a spy, but she's just an idiot.
In the Chinese system, the concept of face is very important. One reason why they have almost 100% conviction rate for anyone who's taken into detention is because no one wants to admit to making a mistake. Every card is stacked against the individual who's taken into detention. To admit guilt by doing that, it makes release one step closer.
You may as well plead guilty, try and be as cooperative as humanly possible and get as light a sentence as possible.
I accepted that to the state, my voice or whatever the hell innocence is doesn't make a scrap of difference, doesn't mean anything.
The Australian government has effectively turned its back on an Australian person being massively mistreated. A woman who grew up in Melbourne, her kids live in Melbourne. Her name is Cheng Lei. She's in jail in China. She's been there for 3 years.
Thank you. You want me to read it?
There was a visit that we took where she said, I have a message to send to my family, but also to the community in Australia.
G'day, Aussies. This is a love letter to 25 million people and 7 million square kilometres of land. Land abundant in nature, beauty and space. While I was sitting, staring, waiting and crying in detention, via the embassy, Nick was able to get my message to a national audience.
G'day Aussies. Excuse the daggy slang from someone in need of ocarism.
It's not the same in here. I haven't seen a tree in 3 years. I relive every bushwalk, see in my mind's eye every river, lake, beach I've ever swum in, fished from, picnicked at. I miss the Australian people.
She's not pleading for help, really, but she's outlining her desperate situation. Cheng Lei is not getting justice. She's not getting decent treatment. This is massively cruel and unfair treatment of an Australian. The woman should come home. Home is Melbourne. This is a Melbourne woman, an Australian woman. We must stand up for her. It's our role, it's our duty. We must.
It's the Chinese in me that's probably gone over the legal limit for sentimentality. Most of all, I miss my children.
She's in limbo, and I think, if you're sitting in limbo for effectively 3 years, it's enormously difficult.
When I approached Nick, I said, look, I'm a journalist. I'm not approaching you about a story. I really think we need to do something because she's just languishing in there and there's no end to this. And it was Nick's suggestion to say, look, why don't we have a letter signed by prominent journalists in Australia to say that we support Lei?
It wasn't just a case of let's jump up and down. We needed to do this strategically. We needed to do it carefully, and there had to be a lot of care taken in how we were going to do it, because we certainly didn't want for Lei to be on the receiving end of some sort of backlash.
So I asked around and no one else wanted to do anything. It was the same kind of mentality of, well, look, if we do anything, it'll probably just make it worse. One person said, there's no point, she's f***ed. And I just couldn't let it go. To whom it may concern, we, the undersigned, are writing to voice our support for Ms. Cheng Lei. We have known her variously as a friend, colleague, mentor, journalist, or fellow Australian. It feels like we were kind of treading so cautiously. Then writing the line, we're confident she's done nothing wrong. Some people were telling me that was too aggressive and wanted me to take that out. And I'm so glad we left it in.
Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews has left Victoria for China ahead of his 4-day trade trip. It'll be the Premier's 7th trip to China since 2015. The Premier has faced criticism for not inviting any media on the trip.
There was a couple of people who certainly disappointed us at the time because that was the strategy.
Daniel Andrews says it was his call not to raise the matter with the officials he met in China.
I did not meet with any officials that would be seen as part of the justice system, for instance.
When Dan Andrews did his trip to China, and when I spoke to his press secretary and made the request directly that he raise the issue, as a laid-beggar Victorian and the children living in Victoria, it was more than appropriate, and I pointed this out, it was more than appropriate for the Premier to do so, that the fact that he chose not to do it says more about Dan Andrews than it does about anyone else, I think. These things actually matter. As we've found out subsequently, DFAT even gave him talking points to raise the issue.
Anthony Albanese has held formal talks with China's President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit. It was the first formal bilateral meeting between an Australian leader and the Chinese president since Malcolm Turnbull was Prime Minister in 2016.
I think the reason that Lei was taken as a political prisoner was China sending a message to the international community, but in particular to journalists, that there are things that are off limits. My name is Sean Turnell, and I was a political prisoner in Myanmar, allegedly for being a spy, for 650 days. This was China wanting to reset relations and using Cheng Lei as a vehicle to do that. This is very typical of all sorts of authoritarian regimes, but particularly China, where they use people as pawns, if you like, for bigger foreign policy goals.
This afternoon, I've just concluded a successful bilateral meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. It was a very positive and constructive discussion.
There's little doubt in my mind that the change in the Australian government led to Lei's release. Had the government not changed, Lei would probably still be in prison.
September 27th, 2023, the day of my sentencing. I'm in that little holding cage before you go into the courtroom. And surprisingly, the judge came. And even more surprisingly, he was all smiles. He said, "Do you know what you'll be sentenced to?" Then I didn't know what to think. And I wanted to say something rude back, like, how the F would I know? And he kept smiling and said, "I think you'll be satisfied with the sentence." I did not know what to think. And when I heard sentenced to 2 years, 11 months, immediately I did the calculation. That meant I would see my family in a matter of weeks. That was the first time in my life I was honestly speechless. I was blind, but now I can see. That was a moment I felt I can see, and my world lit up from within.
It was quite late. It was about 1 a.m. our time and 4 a.m. Canberra time. A lot of people in Australia were awake, waiting for my message that she was on the plane.
Gosh, the sense of relief that finally it was over, finally it was done, and the injustice was ended was a wonderful feeling of elation.
I just cried my eyes out. I still feel quite emotional when I think about it now. I was so relieved because I didn't have to worry about her anymore. She's going to be fine. She's free.
Thank you so much. You don't know how much your letters and your messages have helped me. Welcome home. Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister,
Hello, Prime Minister. What an honour. I was telling Mr. Wong that it's because of you and all the team at DFAT that I'm able to make it here in one piece.
I was just so relieved that she was in one piece. She looked so happy and relieved, and just when I found out she'd been reunited with her kids, it was just like life just couldn't get any better.
What's been wonderful is to see her get her mojo back and come back to life, bit by bit, becoming the old Lei again, looking incredibly fit, happy, healthy, glamorous. She did a recent Vogue shoot and she really rocked the designer gowns. She knows how to wear an outfit. She's just got a real natural confidence, which not many people have got. And I'm so happy to see her get that back because it's really important to who she is and who she is for herself and for her kids.
And all the kind of fantasy scenarios that Nick and I used to discuss, can you imagine if they just threw her on a plane and that she actually made it to Australia and is working as a journalist again?
Live on Sky News Australia, this is Afternoon Agenda with Cheng Lei.
Hello and welcome to Afternoon Agenda. I'm Cheng Lei. Our top stories this afternoon. I am so grateful to be back behind the news desk and deep in the heart of journalism. But when it comes to China, it seems I'm still someone they'd prefer to keep well out of sight.
This is a bad look indeed. Cheng Lei blocked by Chinese embassy officials from seeing the joint press statement.
Brought the leaders to the lecterns.
The Chinese officials that were acting like absolute clowns in that room did the exact job that they were supposed to. It was just classic Chinese, where they just needed to stop her being on any of the feeds that were going back to China. They did not want her face being shown, and they succeeded in that. She wasn't there to just get attention. She was really there to do her job. And I think she did it brilliantly. And I'm just so proud of where she is now and how she's putting her life back together after all this happened to her.
My number one priority is always the children. Then it's about me, being happy and being healthy. Who'd have thought my Friday nights would ever kick off with soccer? But it's just so much fun. And now that I've experienced wrongful detention, I'm keeping busy with the Australian Wrongful and Arbitrary Detention Alliance.
And I've got to say that this fireside chat we're about to have is one I've been looking forward to for months. Let's give a big welcome to Kylie Moore-Gilbert and Cheng Lei.
It's so important that more is done for all wrongfully detained Australians abroad. The advocacy group, AWADA, is another area that helps me heal. I'm a firm believer that whatever wrong has been done you, don't be bitter, but try to make things a bit better for others, and you'll heal better this way.
We know that life will test us in other ways, and we're forever building up our toolkit, our coping mechanisms.
How are you? Hello, Sean. Hello.
God, that seems like weeks ago. It's only 2 weeks.
You're in the wrong job.
In some ways, it's futile to try to catch up because some of it's forever lost.
Thank you so much for writing to me and helping me, and yeah, thank you for everything.
But in other ways, I've been the recipient of extraordinary gifts.
So freedom and friendship.
Freedom and friendship.
Like gaining this incomparable appreciation of life and the preciousness of freedom, which I'm using to the max by trying everything I've ever wanted to experience, not 3 months down the track, but now, right now.
Coming to this market brings back happy memories when I first came here as a 10-year-old almost 40 years ago, and also after coming out of detention, where I used to dream about the fresh food on offer, seeing and smelling the produce and touching the vegetables. And now I'm here, and it's like dream come true. It's paradise.
Journalist Cheng Lei spent more than 3 gruelling years in a Beijing prison. Harrowing, fierce, and often darkly humorous, her memoir is about the power of the human spirit, available now in print, ebook, and audio.